Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and this is part two of a series that I'm doing on natal chart demonstrations. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, I want to give you some basic concepts that you can use right away and trying to interpret birth charts or learning how to interpret natal charts. And also, I do these because I like to give people a little sample of some of the techniques that you'll be learning in the class that I teach, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, if you choose to take it. And you can check that out on my website, nightlightastrology.com. Class starts in the middle of June. There's an early bird discount tuition plan. We have need-based tuition for people who are struggling due to the coronavirus. So check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, I hope that you find this video generally useful. So let's go ahead and take a look at our second natal chart. The first one had some really interesting concepts. If you haven't watched part one of this series, check it out because there's some good core concepts that you can use and apply right away in that video as well. In this video, I'm going to be illustrating a really simple concept that has to do with a planet representing two different topical areas in a person's life at once. So in ancient astrology, planets ruled two signs, one masculine and one feminine, or you could say one yang and one yin, one active and one receptive. And as a result, whenever you're looking at a planet in the birth chart, it's going to land in some particular whole sign house. The planet's natural significations will come to bear on the topics of that house. For example, if you have Venus in the, let's say, the 10th house of career, then you might do something for a living that is Venusian in nature. Maybe you're in the fashion industry. There's a lot of different possibilities, but the natural significations of a planet are those significations that belong to the planet itself, and every planet has them. Jupiter might mean religion or higher learning. Mars might mean action, sports, or war, and so on and so forth. The natural significations of a planet will always matter in whatever house they're in. So that's one way that you can always look at a planet, just looking at the planet in the house. But then planets also rule places. They also rule topical areas of the chart. Again, think of like a 12-card tarot spread. Each card lands in a position that means something. You might get the chariot card in the position that has to do with health. You might get the chariot card in the position that has to do with love. But whatever the case might be, you're reading the card within the context of the place. That's the same kind of relationship that exists between planets and signs and places or houses. So each planet rules two places, which means that wherever a planet is, not only will it affect the significations of its own nature into that place and its topics, but it will also bring in the significations of two houses that it rules and the significations of those houses. So, for example, in this chart, you will see that Jupiter is in the 12th house, doing Jupiter like things in a 12th house setting. That's your baseline delineation. But then it also brings in two other topical areas of life. By virtue of ruling Sagittarius and Pisces, the masculine and feminine domiciles of Jupiter, we also bring in the 4th house topics and the 7th house topics, and they come right along with Jupiter. They are worked into Jupiter in the 12th house. So, for example, in this reading, the prediction that I made, and it's not necessarily a concrete prediction that we're trying to make as much as it is an archetypal prediction that hits close to the mark. So there's a predictive element to it, but we offer, say, a range of possibilities in a reading where we say, oh, look, it looks like the 4th house, which is a place of father, home, parents, family, and the 7th place of love and marriage, both have something to do with Jupiter in the 12th house. What could that mean? Well, it could mean that there was a father who wasn't around because the 12th house is a place of absence, solitude, isolation, or abandonment even. Or it could mean that you lived in seclusion somehow because the 4th house is the place of home and family. Maybe you had to move and never felt like you fit in again after you moved. Um, sometimes there are really strong stories like that. And maybe dad fits the symbolism of Jupiter in the 12th house somehow, or maybe a spouse does by virtue of Jupiter ruling the 7th house of spouses. So you're looking for, and then possibly the two topics could overlap in some way. So in this case, I went through a list of different, kind of circumstances with the client. And one of the circumstances was it's also possible that something about spouse or husband are similar in terms of who they are or what they do. And you could see that showing up as Jupiter in the 12th house like activities. And one of the activities that I mentioned would be the potential to work in hospitals or prisons or psychiatric institutions, different places where people go when they're suffering, or working in some kind of healthcare related field, as the 12th house often deals with not only suffering people, but people who might need some kind of long-term rehabilitative care or something like that. So it turns out that this individual's father worked in a hospital. So there's Jupiter in the 12th house, and he had a very prominent position in the hospital, and that's the Jupiter in Leo. He's got the big title within the hospital, and then also her spouse was a doctor, kind of. Well, we're anonymizing this a little bit, but a sort of a doctor that not only worked in a hospital, but also their family had to move and relocate their entire home to be right next to the hospital. So this is a story about someone who also, when they were young, one of the biggest things that happened in their life was they had to relocate because dad got invited to be in sort of the upper echelons of a new hospital in a different state. So you have this theme of this person being a little transient, in the sense of that they're always moving and never finding a sense of home. And it's tied both to their father and their husband and work in hospitals. And I thought that was just really a great, it fit perfectly. And I didn't get every single detail of that right, but it came really close. And so that's what we're looking for with ancient astrology is, in ancient astrology, these significations and the way you read them are typically giving you information about the person's karma, the concrete external events, people, places, things that will be around them. Now, if you can imagine the same exact placement I've seen in another person's chart where their father died when they were very young. And this was a little switched around, different Jupiter. And in that case, Jupiter ruled the ascendant and the 4th house. So this one, in this chart, this other chart, Jupiter ruled the ascendant, which is yourself, your health, your vitality, your sense of who you are. And then the 4th house of father, and Jupiter was in the 12th. In that case, what was really interesting about it was this individual, after they lost their father when they were young, who died in an accident, they became, they had a little bit of problem with alcohol. And it wasn't a little, it was a big problem for a while. And then they got into recovery and then ended up working in healthcare. And it was Jupiter, and their father was also a teacher. So you have this really interesting blend again in that case, where Jupiter ruled the 4th house of father and the 1st house, which is the place of health, vitality, and your own character, your own sense of being the navigator of your ship. That's really what the 1st house was related to. In fact, the 1st house was related to the steering wheel of the ship of life. And so this native had that classic 12th house self-destructiveness with some addiction, but they ended up working in a sort of healthcare profession, you could say, mental health care, let's say. And then they also had a father, Jupiter ruling the 4th house of father, or parents more generally, but father in the ancient world. And and Jupiter in the 12th would also signify the early loss of their father through an accident. So these significations, the point is that you'll often see one planet bringing together the topics of 2 different houses. And that's always something to watch for. They won't always blend or sync up perfectly, but you'll often see overlap in a chart between 2 houses that are ruled by one planet. In ancient astrology, that's an intentional part of how the system is set up. So you have one masculine and one feminine place, so that Taurus and Libra's houses are always being brought together by Venus. Aries and Scorpio's houses are always being brought together through Mars, and so on and so forth. So I thought you might enjoy this concept. It's a very simple one that takes a while to get used to, and it takes some practice, but you will often find that one planet brings together several topics. Hopefully you can put that to use. I'd love to hear about, in your chart, where do you see one planet bringing together 2 topics, and how do you see that playing out? Tell me your story. If you're able to follow along with that and do some interpreting in your own birth chart, I'd love to hear what you come up with. And in the meantime, yeah, I hope that you're having a nice, hope you're all having a nice week. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you in class soon, where we go through this and so many other topics over the course of a full year of studying together. So hopefully see some of you there soon. All right, take it easy. Bye.